Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. This is an exciting time for me. I'm really happy that you're joining us on Help for Toxic Relationships. You'll notice without a moment's wonder, because we have changed the name, and so that's very clear for you. It was called The Doctor Is In, and now it's called Help for Toxic Relationships. And why? Well, obviously, because that's what it is. And it just made more sense to call it what it actually is. So that's what we're up to. And I'm excited that you're here. Please know that you can ask your questions in the live chat. I will monitor them. I will keep tabs and do my best to answer them. And we'll just wait a few minutes to get this all started because we do want to wait till 6 o'clock when people who know that it starts at 6 actually won't be disappointed to find we started without them. So that's an important thing. And I can see the names of people who are here. So hello, I'm glad that you're here. Please take a second to invite your friends if you think there are some folks who would like to come along. I think it's always a good idea to say to folks, hey, I'm watching this. Maybe we could talk about it afterwards so you watch it too. Just a little disclaimer though, if you have a hijackal in your life, one of those pesky, relentlessly difficult people that I talk about, don't be sending and inviting them over here, okay? A, they don't want to come. So B, we're learning to deal with them, to manage with them, to have strategies and things to work with them. And that's what this is all about. So don't be inviting them. They won't come anyway, but they'd like to know what you're up to. So that's important. And here on the West Coast in sunny San Diego, it's anything but sunny. Not only is it getting dark now, but we've just had another rainstorm this afternoon. Quite a downpour. So if you're thinking you're missing wonderful sunny San Diego, today you're not. Today we are just having weather like everybody else. And San Diego is quite surprised by that. We've actually had rain several times, many times, and lots of it in the last 12 days. So we're not living up to our name just now. So here we are. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, the Relationship Help Doctor, and I'm here to answer your questions, to talk about a few things that are top of mind today. I'm going to start with a topic. Feel free to wander wherever you'd like to go with it. I always think it's good to have a starting place, but I'd just like to offer a little disclaimer before we begin. Please don't construe anything that's happening here today as therapy. It isn't. Therapy is what happens when you are with a practitioner like myself who actually knows you and has become familiar with you and your circumstances and can deal with that exact thing, the unique things about your relationship, the unique things about you and your partner, maybe your children or your circumstance. So this is a broad stroke kind of thing, just painting broad strokes, because I can't answer the questions in a way that would be 100% clear for you and your circumstance. But I will do my very best to answer the questions in a way that you can apply to your circumstance. So I hope that you will keep that in mind. Not therapy, but certainly is good advice. And you can learn more about me at my website, forrelationshiphelp.com, FOR relationshiphelp.com. And I'm going to share some good ideas, some general communication strategies, some conflict management strategies. But one of the things that I think is really important for us, and that's why I chose it as today's opening topic, is why are we so attractive to hijackals? You know, for many people in my practice, and because I work through video conferencing, I have people all over the world in my practice. And you can work with me too, because all you need is your computer, your camera, and a microphone, and we're off to the races. But of all these people, so frequently people say to me, do you know, I've had more than one hijackal in my life. Now, if you're new to my work, let me tell you about the hijackal. A hijackal is a term that I created. And I created that term because I felt there were too many people who were going to the internet and saying, this is how my partner or my parent or my boss or my friend behaves. And the internet was spitting back psychological terms like narcissist or psychopath or sociopath or borderline or whatever. And the internet can't diagnose anyone. It can give you some things to think about, but it can't give you a diagnosis. But one thing for sure, all hijackals drink from the same pool of traits. So you can certainly use that in your thinking to be very, very clear that we can use this non-clinical term that I created because we can talk about the patterns, the traits, the cycles, the general behaviors of these people so that you can recognize that. And it's so important to recognize that because until you do, they make everything your fault and you might be believing it. And that wouldn't be very helpful. So remember the chat. I'd love it if you'd say hello, let me know that you're here, and that you are free to ask a question. Don't worry about interrupting. Just put your questions in there or your comments. Be part of the conversation tonight. So back to the topic, why am I so attractive to hijackals? And it's asked frequently because many times my clients will have had more than one hijackal in their life. They may have had more than one hijackal partner romantically. And they may wonder, why? Why does this keep happening to me? And so it's a very good question. So here's some thoughts about it. First of all, if you had a hijackal parent, and you may not have even thought about having a hijackal parent because that was just your parent. And you thought, well, that's how my parents are. And you may not have thought about it. But the fact is, I want you to think about it. Because you have maybe been less than validated by your home life. And when you're less than validated by your home life, you won't expect to be validated by other human beings. And that makes you just a lovely person to attract a hijackal because they like lovely people. They like compassionate people. They like people that they believe will go the extra mile for them or give them a longer rope or forgive them over and over and over and over no matter what they do. So they really like good people. And they like not non-demanding people. And ideally, what would really make them happy, float their boat, is that you would be a person who would actually make excuses for their bad behavior. You would help them out in that way. You would make excuses or rationalizations. Any thought you've ever done that? Oh, he's just having a bad day. Oh, she's been angry for a while, but she has a right to be. She had a bad childhood. You know, yes, those are human things to do. But when you look back and you think, wow, has that happened to me repeatedly? Maybe there's a pattern here. So when we are accepting and loving and we listen, and we do give people extra time to figure things out, or we let them behave badly and we don't call them on it, or we don't have strong boundaries, then those hijackals are just looking there. They're kind of predators, so that you become very, very good prey. In fact, what I say is you become hijackal bait. And being hijackal bait, not so great. Good evening to you too. And thank you, Helena. That's lovely. And hello, Darla. So it's nice to see you here. As I said a little bit earlier, please feel free to comment. I will notice the comments. Ask your question at any time. And I'll just go back and say what I said earlier. What I'm talking about during our weekly live streams is not therapy. Therapy is what happens when a person like me gets to know you really well and know your circumstances very specifically. So I'm going to do the broad brushstrokes tonight. If you ask a question, I'll do my best to tell you exactly what is usual, but please don't construe it as being therapeutic, although it may be. It may help you a lot, and you may be very happy to have heard it. So what makes us attractive to these people? We're nice. We're just nice people. Now, I was raised by 2 hijackals, and I'm an only child. So I got all of the attention that there was to give from 2 hijackals. But know something. If you were raised by a hijackal parent, a hijackal parent is not the least bit interested in who you are or how you feel, no more than a hijackal partner is. A hijackal parent cares how you can make them look good, so they care about what you do and how you make them look good. But a hijackal parent does not validate your feelings and does not validate who you are as a person. So a hijackal parent will say things like, "Oh, you're going to cry, are you? What's wrong with you? If you need to cry, I'll give you something to cry about." Does that sound familiar at all? That's what hijackal parents do. They're not interested in who you are and how you feel. So if you live with that long enough in your life, is it surprising that when one comes along in your dating life, that you're going to be unaccepting? No, because you're comfortably uncomfortable. It's familiar behavior. And so even though there are things about it that you don't like and they kind of put you on edge, you think, oh, I know how to deal with this. And then we have that thing that if only I love them enough, if only I nurture them enough, if only I take care of them, if I'm compassionate and patient and nurturing and non-demanding, then they'll know that they're loved and they'll start behaving nicely towards me. Well, with healthy people having a bad day, that'll work beautifully. But with hijackals, it won't work at all. I know, it's sad, but that's the way it is. And it's hard to believe that sometimes because we don't want to. Because remember, we're good people. So I was raised by these 2 hijackals. One was overt and one was covert. So my mother was overt. She would just say whatever was on her mind. She would say whatever she wanted to say about people. And she'd put on a really good picture for the public. And you've probably heard me say before, if you follow my work, that hijackals paint a public picture of perfection, while at home they're creating a private place of pain. So my mother had this thing going on where she thought that everybody thought she was wonderful, and at home she was anything but wonderful. That was in overt hijackal. But my father was covert hijackal, which is a mask for low self-esteem. So he was the one who was always, "Oh, well, if you are going to complain, you'll make me sick. It'll upset me. You shouldn't be upsetting me." Covert, hidden. I'm not much and you're making me less. So we have those 2 things going on. And I'm an only child, so I'm getting 2 messages of complete dysfunction. Now, fortunately, I was a pretty smart little kid, and I used to look at them and go, something's not good here. But it took years and years to actually really learn what was going on. It was after I got my PhD in psychology that I really started to apply it to what had gone on. And of course, yes, I met and married a hijackal, divorced one, co-parented with one, did all of that, because that's what you do. So please don't make yourself wrong if that happened to you. And Helena says, my ex would take my good stories as if it was him. Oh, yes, they love to take credit for anything good, don't they? And they never give you credit for offering it to them. Sometimes he wasn't even there, she says. He starts telling a story, and I have to tell him, that wasn't you. That happened to me, and you weren't even there. Exactly. Because they've got to suck all the air out of the room. It has to be allaboutme.com. And so they're going to talk about it as if it were them, just like your husband did. And I like the fact you said he's your ex, because that means that you have learned something from that. That wasn't okay. That wasn't good enough for you. And you weren't going to put up with that for the rest of your life. Most often people move on from hijackals, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes there are circumstances, children, distances, money, many, many things that'll keep you there. But tonight, and feel free to ask questions about that, but tonight we're talking about what makes you attractive to these people. And so your unwillingness to set boundaries is wildly attractive to a hijackal. Because they'll push, and they'll push, and they'll push, and you don't push back. And you may be thinking you're being kind and accepting and unconditionally loving, something I don't much believe in. And you're not. What you're doing is you're condoning their behavior and you're enabling it. But they like you because you don't have clear boundaries, and you don't express them, and you don't maintain them, and then you don't have consequences for them if they go over them repeatedly. How many of you feel like you have strong boundaries and people know what they are? You can just put a yes in the chat if you think you do. And I'll be watching down there, because one of the big things about people who come across as nice and warm and all of that, when they meet a hijackal, they're expecting that person to fall into the healthy category or the range of normalcy in the way relationships roll, and they don't. They're looking to push past you, to squish you in, make you smaller so they can take up more space. So they're attracted to you because you're nice, because you're good, because you don't push back. And so they get everything they want. And then if you do push back or you do say something about their behavior, they don't accept it, do they? They simply say, oh, you're always complaining. Oh, you're always finding fault. What makes you think that you can always be complaining? You know, that's what they do. They turn it back on you. And so you shrink a little and you become a little less. And they like that too. Is this making sense to you? Ah, Amanda, not with my husband. He crosses them constantly. Well, ask yourself, why are you not enforcing those with consequences? Because I'd love to hear that. Happy to talk about it. So go ahead and say some more in the chat, Amanda. Boundaries are so important. You hear about them all the time. And their importance. I've written about it. I have done many articles. I have done YouTube videos about it. And it's essential. My podcast, I've had several of each of my podcasts helping people understand about boundaries. If you don't know about my podcast, you can find them wherever you like to get your podcast. One of them is called Emotional Savvy. The other is called Save Your Sanity. And in a couple of weeks, there'll be a third one. And it's called Focus on Forward, Fuel for a Fearless Future. So keep that in mind. That's coming up. So boundaries. A boundary is a clear statement of what's all right with me and what's not all right with me. It's where the edge is, where someone can come up to, but if they cross it, There's pushback. No, that's not all right with me. Now, hijackals hate boundaries. Of course they do. But if you don't have boundaries, you start not feeling good about yourself. Right? You start getting smaller and smaller. And you start retracting and receding. And then you get worn down and torn down. And then you stop even protesting if you're with a hijackal partner for very long, or a hijackal parent. You know, there were many times in my adult life where I had to walk out on my mother. Right? No, my children will not hear this. No, I will not stand here another minute and be spoken to in that way. She knew exactly where the boundaries were with me as an adult, but she didn't care. So there had to be consequences. There had to be, if this continues, I will leave. I will take the children. If this continues, I will take a 6-week break from any interaction with you. And sometimes that really helped because I was an only child. There wasn't another child, another supply for her to turn to. But you'll find that if you're from a family where there are several siblings, you can say no to your parent and push them off for a while, but they'll go to another sibling and they've got that supply. Now, what's this thing about supply? That's what hijackals need. They need supply. And supply is people who will not call them on their stuff. Supply are people for whom they can have control and they can take power over. People who will feed their ego, people who will agree with them, people who will do what they want them to do. That's supply. And hijackals always have supply. They may be in a primary relationship with you, and if they're not actively having a little side hustle somewhere, they have prospects. They're grooming some supply. They have friends. They may not be doing anything with those friends, but they have them. They are grooming the supply. Those are the people that they can run to and say how awful you are. But that's a topic for another time. So why do we have a problem setting boundaries? Well, we're nice people. And one of the other things that we do that makes us nice and why hijackals like us is we leave a lot of wiggle room for people. We're understanding. We can see that the lie that they're telling us is a possibility. And that just delights them. Right? They're telling us the story they want us to believe, and we see it as a possibility, and we're kind and we don't want to shoot them down, so we take it in, and maybe even we believe it. Or maybe even if we don't believe it, we don't want the fight, so we just let it go. But that's not going to help you. And if you have children, you always have to think, what is the model that I'm demonstrating for my children by how I'm behaving with a hijackal partner? Because long before children have language, they're watching everything that you do. They're learning how to read feelings and how to read people and where they're safe and where they're not and how to do it. And you know that's true. Because haven't you had this experience when you have a little child who begins to learn to stand up? And you catch them standing up and you look at them and go, wow, they're standing just the way their parent does. Look at that. They just look like a mini you. They've been studying you. And they're also taking in everything, even though they don't have language, tone of voice, stance, body posture, safety, feelings, all of that's going in there. And that may have happened to you. Maybe you had a hijackal parent, so all that's in there. Now you are in even quicker study of another hijackal coming into your life. So Amanda asks, can hijackals get help or are they a lost cause? Great question. I'll answer it this way. Hijackals who absolutely will get help are rare. But hijackals who will come with you for help are a little more common. And the reason for that is because they have a history of being able to go to a mental health professional and manipulate, seduce, and exploit the professional into believing them, and then ganging up on their partner and re-wounding their partner again. So it's a little bit of a challenge for them to go to see a counselor, a therapist, or a consultant like me, because they think they can pull the wool over my eyes, which they can't. I have a great hijackal radar. But many times they will go for a little bit. So can they get help? Yes, they can get help. Will they stay for the help? Most of them will not, because they cannot tolerate the idea that there is anything amiss with them. You know that. They cannot tolerate the idea, they can't even entertain the idea that they have a shortcoming, a flaw. Maybe they need help, maybe they need skills, maybe they need to learn to do something. To them, that is unthinkable, because they have had to create this facade that they are perfect. So there are a few that have been able to be helped in a very safe environment over a long period of time. When I work with people, I have a 1-hour introductory session, and after that you choose a package of 8 or 16 sessions. If you're going to do long-term therapy with a hijackal, always the 16 sessions, because it takes that time. And if they quit, then you have the benefit of having all that time left over just for you. So it turns out all right. So the question Amanda asked is, are they a lost cause? Well, I think everybody deserves love, but some people deserve love from a distance. And that's hijackals often. That you can love them from a distance. You can have compassion for them from a distance. And sometimes that's the best thing. Because you're not going to accept these behaviors and make them tolerable in most cases, are you? I mean, Amanda, aren't there things that are just intolerable? And that no matter what, you didn't want to put up with them, or you didn't want your children to see them or to think they're all right. So most hijackals are not interested in help. As I said, they're interested in pulling the wool over the eyes of the therapist so that they can demonstrate the power that they have. And way too many of my clients have said that they've been to 2 or 3 therapists before they came to me. And each time, it was a really big problem because the therapist didn't see it. And you don't see these things every day. And if you haven't had the experience yourself, you're even less likely to think them. In fact, I was having a conversation with a colleague a few weeks ago, and she was a licensed social worker. And we were talking about this very thing, being able to see this. And I said, do you think you can see it? And she said, we had a whole day on personality disorders in our learning. Wow, a whole day. I've had a whole lifetime. So book learning is one thing, but actually understanding, seeing it, being able to talk about it, being able to lead it out, being able to give it a name, that's a whole other thing. So I hope that helped, Amanda. Great. And now I had to let my mother go recently due to her being a hijackal. I had to keep her away from my children. Oh, I so get that. I so get that. Many, many times I had to walk out of my parents' home. My father was covert, so what would he do? He'd have a drink, he'd sit there, he'd put his head in his hands, and he'd say, oh, I just can't stand this. Any kind of tension, any kind of conflict makes me ill. Why can't you people stop? And so he would stop the conversation by saying, you're making me sick. But my mother, she would say the most awful things. I remember one day that I was in the car with my parents because we just left church. We'd gone to the city where my parents lived and they wanted to go to church, something that they didn't do when I was young, but they learned that they could really get something there, and it wasn't all spiritual. They got a good parking spot, and they got a community that had to like them. I went to church with them, and I had my 3 children with me. And as we were leaving church, we were coming to a stop sign that was right by the church. And there was a person who was quite inebriated walking across the road. And my mother lit into the most racist, horrible, denigrating conversation. I quietly opened the door at the stop sign and let my children out, in full view of everybody standing on the church steps, I might add. And my mother was, furious. And my father, of course, was, "You're going to make me sick. This is embarrassing." And I said, we would rather walk than have my children confused by having learned one thing at church and hearing another thing immediately after. Now, we did get back in the car and we did go home, and then I got in my car and took my children home. So I understand completely why you might let your mother go, and to go to no contact. And no contact is a phrase that we use frequently, which means that we have to have no contact in order to keep ourselves sane and safe. That we recognize the crazy making is not going to stop, and we make a clear decision not to entertain it any longer. Not through any means. We don't answer phone calls. We don't invite them over. We don't go and visit them. We have no interaction. And sometimes that's the length you have to go to be safe. And I hope that that is something that you consider and see how it works for you. Or maybe you're good with email and there's no tone of voice issue there. Maybe you're okay with text. Everybody will find that it's either no contact or low contact or just a little contact, or you're fully in the incredible circus with all the monkeys, flying monkeys all around. It's an important thing that you decide for yourself. So I hope that not having your mother in your life, sad though it is, because we'd all like to have functional parents. We'd like to have people who love us and validate us. It's a great loss to have had hijackal parents, because you never have that experience. You never have the hallmark moments that you so long for in your life. All right, so Purple Belt says, how come my hijackal has been going to his counselor for 2+ years, one after our divorce and walking out on couples counselor? He's months into his new live-in supply and he hasn't changed. He's worse. And he's going to his counselor. Is he really going? I've had hijackal partners who told their partners they were going to counseling, and when they called the counselor to find out, they'd gone once and hadn't repeated the experience. So first of all, find out for sure if in fact you don't need to know. I mean, you're not with him anymore, but maybe he's not actually going. And if he is going, maybe he has a counselor who feeds his ego, who agrees with him. I've had that circumstance many times where they have been going every now and again, but they go because the counselor says, oh, yes, your partner was terrible. Oh, yes, I can see your point of view. They don't go for therapeutic reasons. They go for validation. So I hope that makes sense to you. He's with his new live-in supply and he hasn't changed. He's worse. Well, why not be worse? He's obviously showing that, I can get another person. Look at me. And you know very well that he's love bombing her, and she's going to go to the side any moment. And you say he's worse, so he's probably just simply giving her all the attention and being horrible because he's feeling so full of himself that he has the new supply. So obviously he's not getting anything from the counseling. So the question is the counseling actually validating him, or is it doing anything to help him behave in a more civilized manner? And likely not. Oh. Oh, good. Being without your mother in your life has worked since 2016. Good. Good, good. I think that that's a testament to your strength, that you could say that you deserved a good quality of life, and that was a deterrent. Having your mother in your life was just one of those things that kept your shoulders up by your earlobes every day, wondering when she's going to strike, when she's going to say something, when she's going to do something. And we don't want to live like that, always looking over our shoulder or being a little bit tense, wondering what's coming. We don't want to do that. So, you have a 17 and a 19-year-old, so you can't go no contact. Well, you can go text only. Text and email only, and there's a really good reason for doing that. Because you have a written record for the court. At any time that they want to revisit the court experience, you still need to have good documentation. So very little help ever happens with kids 17 and 19 that cannot be broadcast by text or email. And remember that neither one of them demand that you respond right away. But with the text, you'll always know about an emergency, and you can decide if it's a non-emergency. So you can be very low contact and have contact only in the context of the children, nothing else. I hope that that's what you're doing. It's so interesting with people with all these different names here because I can't call you much. SH47. So Purple Belt says with the 17 and the 19-year-olds, he puts it on our shared parenting calendar and it drives you crazy. Well, yes, but let's just really step up to the plate here and say, maybe you don't have to let it drive you crazy. Maybe that's a habit that you've gotten into. Instead of letting it drive you crazy, why not observe it and go, oh, there he goes again, being a hijackal. And I'll tell you about a client that I had way long time ago. And she had an old house, and in that old house, it had shag carpet. I don't know if anybody remembers shag carpet, but it was really something. And usually came in orange and avocado, so really delightful. But she still had shag carpeting in her old house, and she was a person who really prided herself on her home. So while the kids were at school all day, she would get the house in perfect condition, and shag rugs had to be raked. They had shag rug rakes so that it all looked beautiful. And she said to me, you know what I really hate? I really hate it. I get the house all perfect. The kids come home and then they make footsteps all through the shag carpet and it looks like I never did anything. So we had to think about that. And I said, well, what would it be like to change, to reframe that? What would it be like to sit down and look at your shag carpet with the footsteps in it and say, oh, look at that. Someone I love was just here. We can always reframe things. So I would certainly consider Purple Belt reframing what he puts on your shared parenting calendar with, oh, there goes that hijackal nature again. And then just be Teflon. Just let it slip right off you. Because otherwise you're giving him power. You're giving him power to have an effect on you, or to create tension, or maybe even get a response from you now and again, which just feeds the bear, the hijackal. So I hope that you don't, and yes, you're welcome. So why else would these people be attracted to us? Well, we're empathetic. We're willing to listen, and boy, do they like an audience. So you're willing to listen and they're willing to talk? Perfect. Now you want them to talk? All of a sudden it's the silent treatment. Because this is all about power. It's all about power. They're afraid they don't have any, and they want to demand having it all the time. So that's really important. Oh, I'm trying to reframe. Hard after 25 years of reacting. Oh, so hard. Yes. But so wonderful to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do that. You're not going to have that power over me. I'm just going to go, nope, let that hijackal out of here. Let that hijackal energy go. Ah, there it goes again. No, 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 doesn't matter to me. Not the way that I want to spend my energy. Not a response at all. Just become Teflon woman when you look at that shared calendar. That's the important thing. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if you think back, Purple Belt, to your own upbringing, did you have a hijackal parent or somebody who approached hijackal behavior, or even a passive-aggressive parent? Because you would have become used to this kind of behavior, which is probably why you put up with it for 25 years. Let me just say this about passive-aggressive people. You know, I've written 16 books. Some of them are on passive aggression. And that's really important to understand, that there are people who are simply passive-aggressive, and that they're not hijackals. But all hijackals are passive-aggressive. So there's a distinction to be made. And a passive-aggressive person is a person who doesn't like conflict. So when you ask them to do something, they'll say, yes, sure, sure, sure. When you ask them if they did it, they'll say, no, you shouldn't expect me to do that. And why did they do that? They didn't want the conflict of saying no to you in the beginning. So they just let their behavior contradict and create conflict. And that's a minimum example. But I did write a book called Stop That's Crazy Making, How to Quit Playing the Passive-Aggressive Game. And that's all of them are available on Amazon. So if you have a passive-aggressive person in your life, or you recognize that you'd like to know more about passive aggression, go there. And if at any time you want to be part of my membership program, Optimize Circles, to get a little closer to all the things that I talk about, I took the discussion threads that I have had on Facebook, minimized them, and took them over and created a very safe place on my website. So right now it's in a bit of flux, so we have a very, very inexpensive structure. But in just a couple of weeks, it's going to be nailed down and all the prices are going to go up. But if you join in now, you can keep the prices that you start at. So if that interests you, if you'd like to be part of the discussion forums, you'd like to get my 21 Steps to Empowered Emotional Savvy via email over 47 days, great course. Takes you through all kinds of interesting things and thoughts to journal. Then you can go over to forrelationshiphelp.com/circles, and you can choose which level of circle you'd like. forrelationshiphelp.com/circles. All right, so SH47 says, I moved my mother in with me, and she gave me and my sons the silent treatment after I told her that she could not call them stupid and talk to them mean. Oh, how typical is that? I'm so sorry that that happened. I mean, silent treatment is an attempt to have power over, right? It's just so lacking in communication skills and such a bid for power. And when someone does that, you know, it's very important to not allow that to continue. To read it as, you don't want to be with me? Go. If you don't want to talk to me, if I'm not worth talking to or working things out with, let's not be together. But you don't put up with the silent treatment. I've got several podcasts on the silent treatment and some articles too, so be sure to have a look. You know, you can just Google my name and put silent treatment and you'll find them. So the silent treatment is extremely childish, just as you said. Yes, it's, you know, I'm going to take my toys and go home. You can't make me talk. You know, when children are 2 years old and they don't have very much control in their life, they have control over two things, whether they speak or whether they eat or whether they poop. So you're absolutely right. They can shut down those three things, and when someone does the silent treatment, it's like they're 3 years old. Really? Actually, I was giving a course on communication, and it was something that I did every month. And this fellow put up his hand at one point, and he said, how long does the silent treatment usually last? And I said, well, how long does it last at your house? And he said, well, she won't talk to me for up to 6 weeks. Wow. So, I happen to know him and his wife. And so I said, you're both so afraid. And she's particularly afraid that she doesn't know what to say. That's the only tool she has in her toolkit. How about we work together and get some better skills, some better tools in your toolkit? And we did that. But the silent treatment is something that people do who don't believe that they know how to get what they want. And so they try to use this manipulation. If somebody gives you the silent treatment, you always have to look at your own behavior too, because maybe you're angry. Maybe you're hard to talk to. And so they just don't want to try. They feel defeated and they want some power over the situation. So the silent treatment is an important one to think about the dynamic that's occurring from both sides when that happens. So Purple Belt says, my mother and ex gave me silence months at a time. I didn't realize how abusive it was until I left. Yes, because they're telling you that you're invisible to them, that you truly don't matter, that they don't even see you. They can get along just perfectly well without you. And it is abusive because they don't want you to leave, do they? They want you to stay and put up with it, so they have someone to abuse. And I'm so glad that you used the word abuse, Purple Belt, because it is abusive. And many times we don't want to admit we're being abused, verbally abused, or emotionally abused, or spiritually abused. We may be a little more likely to talk about it if we're sexually or physically abused. But those scars heal. The ones that are emotional take a much longer time than a physical scar does to heal, because it becomes part, we internalize it. And so it's very important to learn to really take that in and understand that you must stop tolerating abuse, and you must know what it is. And that's why I made my course. You know about my course, Seeing the Cycles? You can see it at forrelationshiphelp.com under programs, but it's a 13 video program with journaling, worksheets, and everything. And Seeing the Cycles is about being able to see why people do the manipulative, toxic things that they do, and to be able to recognize them immediately when they happen. But you have to work it through. So that's why there are videos and worksheets and journaling suggestions and articles and everything there. So just go to For Relationship Help and go to Seeing the Cycles. Oh, I'm glad I've helped. How did I help, Purple Belt? What was most helpful to you? Because one of the things I hope was helpful was to validate your experience. And that's something that we don't get much when we're with the hijackal, because the hijackal is absolutely determined not to validate our even being, let alone our experience or our feelings. But if we had a hijackal parent before that, we're used to not having ourselves validated. And so this is a big learning for many people. So one of the things that hijackals do, and why they like you and why they're attracted to us, is that we will be sympathetic. We will lean in. We will go the extra mile. Oh, that's awful. Oh, that's too bad. Oh, that shouldn't happen to anybody. And then we're all there, trying to make up for it. Oh, I'm glad you've been following me for a while. I'm always happy to hear that. So we try to make up for somebody's poor life. You can't do that. They have to do that work. And every one of us needs to do our own work. When people ask me, well, should I just leave when I'm in an abusive relationship? I always say, unless there's sexual or physical abuse, no. First of all, we should work together so that you become clear and you become focused and you become empowered and you have strategies to try before you leave. You have ways to calibrate what's going on before you leave. And then I have a whole series of things that I do with people to help them prepare to leave. First of all, I have a series of things to help them decide whether they're staying or going. Then I have a series of things to help people, once they've decided to leave, to prepare to leave, so that you don't end up leaving in some disempowered way with limited funds, few possessions, a bad court outcome. And I'll walk with you through finding an attorney, to instructing an attorney, to understanding the courts, all of that. Because the courts can be very rewounding. And I'm sure that the people online here that have ever divorced an abusive person know that the courts can rewound you. Has anyone had that experience? Where you went there hoping for justice and what you got was legality? Where the hijackal lied in court and manipulated the facts and the court believed you? Always remember that the court is a snapshot. It's a snapshot on that day. That's what the court sees. They don't see the video of your life. So it becomes very, very important to be able to instruct your attorney in particular ways to talk about it, to present that in court. Because many people will go to court and they'll feel terrible. They didn't get the result that they needed, let alone the one that they wanted. And there are things that you can do to help with that. So we have about 10 minutes left. Does anybody have a question on anything at all? Please put it in the chat. I really welcome you doing that. I hope you've subscribed to this YouTube channel so that you will get notices when the live stream is about to happen each week or when there's a new video posted. Also, when you're at my website at forrelationshiphelp.com, you can sign up, or you can get my free ebook and sign up. My free ebook is called How to Spot a Hijackal, and you'll find that there. And that way you will get my tips for relationships automatically as well, and notices of when articles are posted. So Purple Belt said, definitely court was ridiculously hard. He's very charming, smart, PhD. Yeah. Most hijackals are smart. I've met a few not so smart ones, and if they weren't so hurtful, they would be humorous because they're so clumsy. But most of them are smart. They have to be, because as young children, they become very discerning. They're checking things out. They're highly calibrated, and they're having to figure things out way earlier than their brain function would allow them. And so they get some wires crossed in there. Most hijackals are made. Very few of them are born that way with some neural wiring that's a little off. Most of them are made by their early environment. So yes, charming. Oh, big hallmark of a hijackal, right? And smart and doing well and painting a public picture of perfection. You said he's a fire chief. Now, what could be better than that? You want a little amusement sometimes, or maybe a little shock? Just go to the internet and do a search on careers of psychopaths. Look at the things that they choose, and you can clearly see that they choose places they have power over other people's lives. That's very important to them. So I'm just going to recap. Why do toxic people find us attractive? Well, we're compassionate, we're accepting, we'll go the extra mile, we're a good person, they can count on us, we're loving, we're nurturing, we're accepting. And I said that earlier, but I have to say it over and over. We accept their nonsense for too long. We believe them. We're not demanding. We may have very permeable boundaries. We're very empathetic, and we're sympathetic as well. So we are just a hijackal's dream if those things are true. And if you've been with a hijackal, you've learned a lot. Hopefully, you continue to learn and you find a way to say, no, these behaviors will not fly with me, and I do not want my children emulating them. Now, you know, at the beginning I said anything that I say does not apply to every situation. There are many times when I work with somebody and it's not appropriate for them to leave because of the children, because of the circumstance, or because of the finance or the assets. Many times we can find a way to leave by doing some work and working it through. But every situation is different. There are times when it's very difficult on children to leave, and there are times that it is easier to leave. One of the things that always happens is, of course, you're going to have shared custody. And if your children are of a certain age where they do not have language and discernment, they do not have prefrontal lobe development or parietal lobe development, it is very confusing for them because they only know their other parent as their other parent, and they cannot discern things for themselves. So all of these factors play in when we're deciding whether or not to leave and when to leave or if to leave. So again, it does not mean that everybody is going to have the same experience, nor should they do the same thing. Very important. So any other questions? Anything else on your mind? Anybody have a topic that you'd really like me to cover on one of these Monday evenings? So I'm always happy to do that. And you can always communicate with me, just come onto my Facebook page, Relationship Help Doctor, facebook.com/Relationship Help Doctor, and you can comment in there. So I think we've covered a great number of aspects of why we would be attractive to hijackals, and maybe that will lead you to say, maybe I'll make some changes, don't want to be so attractive to hijackals. On Wednesday, we are having a webinar, and it's called How to Protect Yourself When You Haven't Been. And this is an important webinar because if you are out of a hijackal relationship and you're thinking of dating or looking at being in another relationship, you need to know how to protect yourself. So if that interests you and you'd like to know more about the webinar, just send me an email. You can get me directly at RS, my initials, at forrelationshiphelp.com, and I'll tell you about the webinar. It's about 75 minutes, but it'll help you understand what you need to have in place in order to feel protected and safe when you go out in the world, perhaps entertaining other relationships, or having had a hijackal parent and going out in the world initially. Maybe you haven't even had other relationships and you don't want to have ones that are like that. So thank you for being with me. I'm so glad that you were here. It's my pleasure to do this on Monday evenings. Please come along next time. Tell your friends, get them to subscribe so they will get a notice. And I don't know what next week's topic will be, but if you have liked my page on Facebook, Relationship Help Doctor, then you will see I post what the topics are, and I post everything that's on there because I'm interviewed several times a week, so I'm always having not only my podcast, but other people asking me questions about different things in life, so there's always ongoing things for you to learn from. Thank you so much to SH47 and Purple Belt. I'm so glad you were here and we're part of the conversation. These are important conversations to have. So take good care, and I look forward to talking with you all next week. Bye-bye.